Welcome to our segment on getting into compliance. So what do you do if you've been non-compliant with your foreign reporting obligations? A lot of people ask me, what do I do if I haven't been filing my US taxes, my FBAR, or any other foreign reporting that's required? Am I going to have to pay a penalty? Am I going to go to jail? Am I going to be charged with a crime? What do I do? How do I get back into compliance? The answer is you have a lot of different options. The IRS has several programs available to get back into compliance. The first one we're going to talk about is the Offshore Voluntary Disclosure Program, or OVDP for short. The Offshore Voluntary Disclosure Program is essentially designed for people that were intentionally hiding money overseas, potentially have some criminal liability, and need to get back into compliance. Sort of a buy your way out of trouble type program. In order to be eligible for this program, you have to have invested legal funds in whatever it is that you didn't report. So basically you didn't get it from dealing drugs or some other type of crime. You cannot have made a submission under one of the streamlined filing procedures, which we'll discuss a little bit later in this segment, and you can't be under civil or criminal investigation by the IRS. The basic requirements of this program are you have to file original or amended tax returns for the last 8 years, original or amended FBARs for the last 8 years. You have to pay any back taxes, interest, and penalties. You also have to pay a monetary penalty of 27.5% to 50% of the highest value of the unreported assets in the last 8 years. So basically, you look at the last 8 years, you find the year with the highest value of unreported assets, and you pay a 27.5% or 50% penalty based on that value. There's also some additional questionnaires and paperwork that need to be filled out to qualify for the Offshore Voluntary Disclosure Program. Now we're going to talk about the Streamlined Foreign Offshore Procedure. In order to qualify for this procedure, the failure to comply has to have been non-willful. Basically, you didn't do it on purpose, you didn't know, you have bad information, you got bad advice, something along those lines. You have to meet a non-residency requirement, which means that in one of the last 3 years, you have to have been outside the United States for 330 days or more. You have to fail to report and pay tax on income from a foreign financial asset, and you can't be under criminal or civil investigation by the IRS. Assuming you meet those eligibility requirements, you have to file or amend up to 3 years of tax returns, file or amend up to 6 years of FBARs, pay any back taxes and interest, sign a certification of non-willfulness along with a statement explaining why you failed to comply. If you do all that, there's no penalty. Now, there's also a streamlined domestic offshore procedure. The streamlined domestic offshore procedure is essentially the exact same as the streamlined foreign offshore procedure that we just discussed, except it applies to those that don't meet the non-residency requirement. The non-residency requirement is basically being outside the United States for 330 days or more within the last 3 years. So if you don't meet that requirement, then you can take part in the streamlined domestic offshore procedure. Basically, you would be required to amend 3 years of tax returns, file or amend 6 years of FBARs, pay any back taxes and interest, sign a certification of non-willfulness, provide an explanation of why you failed to comply. This program does contain a penalty, but it's only 5%. Basically, it's 5% of whatever the undisclosed assets were over the last 6 years. Moving on to the Delinquent FBAR submission procedure. This is essentially a program for people that reported all their income on their tax return and they just failed to file an FBAR. So in order to be eligible for this program, you have to have reported and paid tax on all the income from all your foreign financial accounts. You have to have failed to file FBARs and not be under criminal or civil investigation by the IRS and not have been contacted by the IRS about your failure to file FBARs. Assuming you meet that criteria, then it's pretty easy. All you have to do is file the delinquent FBARs along with an explanation explaining why you failed to file the FBARs, and that's it. There's no penalty. Finally, we're going to talk about the Delinquent International Information Return Submission Procedure. There's several international information returns. Most of them have to do with ownership of foreign entities. If you haven't filed any of these international information returns, and you should have, but you reported all the income from the foreign entities, then you could very well qualify for this procedure. Essentially what it requires is you failed to file international information returns, you have reasonable cause for failing to file them, you're not under criminal or civil investigation by the IRS, and you haven't been contacted by the IRS regarding your failure to file. Assuming you meet that criteria, you have to file the delinquent information returns along with any amended returns if required. You have to file a statement of reasonable cause explaining why you failed to comply. Assuming you do all that, there's no penalties. You're back in compliance simply by filing the delinquent information returns along with amended returns if applicable and the reasonable cause statement. We thank you for joining us in this segment of Getting into Compliance. We hope you found it helpful.